recognize the ranking member for opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. I yield back.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Distinguished gentlelady from California, Mary Bono. Gentlelady is recognized.
Chair now recognizes the lady from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Mary Bono, former U.S. Representative for California's Inland Empire and Desert Region from 1998 to 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm your host, Mary Bono, and I'm so happy you're here. On this podcast, I hope to bring you insightful conversations with a variety of guests from all walks of life, people with stories, wisdom, and perspectives that inspire and inform. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, and if you feel inspired, leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more listeners like you. Now let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome to Sagely Speaking. This is a really special day for me. This is a little series we're doing of in-person conversations with fascinating people. And I can't tell you anybody who I find more fascinating than this guest, who is none other than the photographer, David Yarrow. Now, when I think of David and I watch his work, and I've been to a number of his events, I think you are one of the most charismatic, interesting, sleep-deprived people I've ever met in my life. Is that fair to say?
No, you flatter me, and I think you meet a lot of fascinating people. I'm very much work in progress.
No.
I have been work in progress for quite a while, but I do live a kind of itinerant lifestyle. That's certainly true.
You do. Now, but to go back to the beginning, last night I was able to listen to you speak. You're an amazing speaker. But you were in the world of finance. Mm-hmm. And I love stories about people who kind of say, screw this, I'm going to do something new and entirely different, which you did. You were very successful in the finance world, correct?
I don't know about that. Our business was always hostage to things beyond our control, whether it be, we were talking about 9/11 earlier on, or whether it be Greek default, or specifically Bernie Madoff. And when Bernie Madoff was arrested on the 8th of December 2008, someone I'd never actually even heard of before, our business, or the business that I had, was effectively dead because we were running money out of London, but a lot of our clients had got very badly burned by Bernie Madoff, and we were effectively an ATM. So I found myself in the kind of early summer of my life with a car crash in terms of a business. And people always used to say, David, you've got a great business because as far as I can see, you've got decent revenue that's way above your costs. And I said, well, it's not really a great business because those costs are there in perpetuity and the revenue can walk out the door any moment. And that's kind of what happened. So in the space of 2 to 3 years, I lost my marriage and my business, and it gave me opportunity to think and start afresh again. J.K. Rowling, my fellow Scot, has a lovely line where she talks about rock bottom being the solid foundation on which she built her life. So that was my kind of rock bottom in that period of time. And it didn't really get any easier because after the Lehman bankruptcy, the kind of business I was involved in was the glory days were behind. Nothing worse than being in your 40s and thinking that the best years are behind you. So I had to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit. But it's funny now, I still stay in touch with a lot of people from that world. And I think the biggest misconception of bankers, which wasn't really helped by the subprime crisis and the bailing out of the big banks, is that they are sort of one-dimensional, heads I win, tails you lose people. And every experience I've had over the last 15 years of working with some of the biggest consumer brands in the world is I've never met a brighter, more sensible collective of people than investment bankers. And I think it held me in good stead to go into something totally fresh.
Totally fresh. So how long did you wallow in that horrible period that became your foundation? Was it the whole 2-year period? Were you resilient and said, damn it, I've hit rock bottom, let's do something new quickly?
I think, well, I was a photographer beforehand and I knew how to hold a camera and use a camera. What I hadn't worked out was how to make money from it. And I know that sounds vulgar, but I think the idea that if you're an artist, you don't have a commercial nouns is a little bit naive. My mum was an artist, and she took great pride in saying, "Oh, I don't understand debits and credits, I'm an artist." Well, I think if you're an artist, you've got to be a businesswoman. Taylor Swift's a businesswoman. And the problem with photography is if you asked 100 photographers living in Colorado, how do they make their money? Not many of them would give you a very good answer. And the reality is that they don't. I think the average photographer in the world earns $35,000. And the average lifespan of a photographer is 2.5 years. So I was going into a situation where I had 2 kids going through boarding school in the UK, nasty alimony. So I'd come home in the evening and say, the reality of it is I need to earn $1 million to break even. And then you think, Christ, how am I going to do that as a photographer? So there was an awful lot of, in the evening, looking through every business model.
Now, David, you had the success of the shot heard around the world, right, so to speak, in the soccer match in Mexico City. Was this prior to your banking?
Oh yeah, I was only 20 then.
Okay.
I was a very young kid, and I wasn't a very good photographer. I just got lucky. But it's fortunate now because the fact that I took that picture and it's well known, it gives a little bit more provenance to my career. It took me 40 years to become an overnight success.
Well, that's phenomenal. But I think as a photographer too, I work a lot, and I did in Congress on intellectual property rights. Mm-hmm. And when you look at these magnificent photographs and how easy it is for people to just reproduce them, is photography a little bit riskier for a photographer to lose the rights to the work and people just reproduce it without proper, licensing?
I think it's a good question. If you ask my peers, some of whom are alive, like Banksy or Tracy Emin, or some of whom are dead, like Warhol, they would see it as a badge of honor to have copycats. You would almost, if you didn't have some factory in China printing T-shirts with your images, you should be asking yourself why. And we have this debate in the office. If we see shirts with my pictures coming out of Chongqing in China, am I really going to go and get a lawyer to stop them doing that? Because it's going to continue to happen somewhere around the line. People can take a picture of a picture. But the key thing really is a photograph on a file, on a digital file, is very different from a print. And they're 2 totally separate jobs. And we work with the best printers in the world, I think, in Los Angeles. And their printing process is patented. And maybe because we're their biggest client and we put through an awful lot of business a year, other people can't really go and use them and say, I want my prints done how David Yarrow's done. They're quite protective, as they should be. So I think there's 2 different issues. I have no problem with my pictures being on a T-shirt in Hong Kong. And then can people print a picture like this? The print's going to come up short. Mm-hmm. But it's always going to happen.
Well, that's a good way of looking at it. I guess the highest form of flattery.
Yeah, I mean,
It's being counterfeited.
Yeah. As I say, you'd worry if no one was trying to rip you off.
Yeah. So all of these photos, and I have your book. I go through it and look at it. Them all, your photos often. I come in here often, and Shannon's gallery. By the way, I should mention we're at Sorrel Sky Galleries in Durango. There are 2 more in Soho, I believe, in New York.
In New York, and then in Santa Fe.
In Santa Fe, which I've been to. I haven't been to the New York gallery yet, but I will be there. But when I think about your life, and I mean, what a life of glamour, yet hardship combined. So how about death-defying experiences? You showed a photo last night, I guess, of what kind of bear was that? It was hard for me to see.
Grizzly bear.
It was a grizzly bear. Mom with 2 cubs. Mom's in front of you, cubs are behind you, and you were sandwiched.
Yeah, but if you go to Alaska in July, they're not interested with you. So it's all about knowing that last bit of knowledge. If you wake them up from hibernation in outside Anchorage in March, you might be in a bit of trouble. And if you go in their path in late September, early October, you might be in a bit of trouble. But while they're fishing, they're sharing the river with fishermen every day. So I don't take risks. I identify as a dad before as a photographer, and so I have responsibilities. We embellish stuff. We play the Jeopardy card, of course, but there really isn't. The most dangerous experiences are always with people, because people can do three things that animals can't. They can get high, they can get drunk, and they can buy a gun. So my most dangerous experiences have always been with people in Africa, by and large.
While you're on a shoot?
Yeah, or I photographed during Civil War in South Sudan, and that was a dangerous time. There was a lot of guns there, and a lot of drugs, and the value of life is small. So I think my most scary experiences, I've had the odd moment in the wild, but I know animal behavior fairly well, and I think also we can do politics, we can talk politics, but
Hey, I'm all ears.
I think wokeism has impinged on creative arts to an enormous degree, and it has affected the whole area of wildlife photography, which was one of the many reasons I pulled away from it. I think 20 years ago, if you, in your endeavor, in your commitment to your craft, if that had involved proximity, which I think it should, you would have been applauded for the resourcefulness and the courage and the wherewithal to be close. Now you should go to hell because the elephant might have to walk around you, or worse still, he might kick a camera and break its foot. Well, that's not going to happen. He might break the camera. He's not going to break his foot. So the fact that proximity became a little bit of a red flag was another reason I pulled away from the photographing the natural world, because my default position was to be immersive and be close.
You did a beautiful job last night while you were talking about the depth of field, I suppose, foreground and background, and the importance. And even though I'm an art history major, I'm glad I get to finally put that to work by talking to you today rather than talking politics. But I really saw it last night when you were talking about it. I finally saw that photograph in its totality, in the beauty of it, the way you laid it out. And truthfully, you've given me some pause every time I take a photo now with my iPhone when I realize how pathetic my shot's going to be after hearing, and your composition, and how you said composition is your number one most important feature, I believe, or the focus that you put on your work.
I'm all for using very weird analogies, but I'll give you one in that I think photographs are like wedding parties, because if you're invited to a wedding on a beautiful Saturday and you don't know the family that well and you're going, I really can't be bothered to go to this wedding. And if you walk into the tent or the pavilion and there isn't someone serving you an espresso martini within 2 yards of you entering the pavilion, you think, I knew it was going to be a shit wedding, I can't believe I'm here. But if you walk into the marquee and within 2 feet there is someone there with a tray of cosmopolitans or espresso martinis or champagne, you go, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this will be all right. And a photograph's like that as well. As soon as you enter the photograph, there should be an espresso martini right away for you to see. And the biggest mistake that there is, photography is not a science. There's no rule book. So each to their own. But the biggest error I see in a lot of the work, that, because we all see a lot of work every day, is it's loose, and there is no espresso martini at the front, and that, I think, is an error. We can all stand 1.5 hours from here, some of the great John Ford scenery in America, or 2 hours from here, but if the first thing that your camera sees is 400 yards away because you're taking a vista shot, something fairly exceptional has got to be going on for it to be an interesting photograph. Normally the weather. And that's one of the problems with landscape photography, and why landscape photographers, some of whom are very dedicated, struggle, because the landscape's always there. It's always there for 365 days a year, and the people that take the best pictures will be the people that happen to turn up when the weather's the most dramatic. And that's not a skill thing, that's putting in time and luck. Mm-hmm. But if you go to places that have a lot of galleries, because they're special places in America, and America has some very, very special, beautiful towns, like here in Durango, or Santa Fe, or Jackson, or Moab, and you go into the shops selling landscape photographs, we would often go in there, and when we leave, we'll say, I wonder what the turnover of that gallery is a year, because we know it's going to be low. Ansel Adams got there before all of us, and that kind of ruins it for everyone else, because he was kind of good. Edward Curtis got there before us as well.
Well, I think you do a pretty good job. I'd hold you up there amongst the top, the greatest. I do believe you're, on your website, you do, somebody put on your website that you're one of the most sought after, photographers now.
Yeah, well, they had this thing at the end of last year, and we got in, I don't read too much into it, but we finally got into the top 10 artists, and I looked at the people above me, and it was Warhol, Basquiat, Hockney, and but I was proud to be representing photography on that list.
Absolutely.
Which is nice. I think it's credit to a marketing team who are hustlers rather than my photography.
Oh, I don't think so. Your photography speaks for itself with all of these pieces around us, and I know the camera's catching some of it. People are listening to the podcast, of course, have to use their imagination and go to your website to look it all up, but I have to ask you about working with supermodels, though. And you're smiling. I guess that's a very complicated question.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, what would I say? That the bigger the name they are, most of the time, the nicer the person they are, and the more likely their entourage are complete nightmares. It's the one tier beneath that's there to protect them that we get wary of. You know, one thing I've learned, and you've had a life where you've had a lot of exposure to this, I know. One thing about fame is that famous people have exactly the same lives as ours 95% of the time. They have family issues, they have occasional health issue, they need to go to the dentist, they need to get their hair done. The only thing that they don't have is time. And time is such a precious commodity. If you take some of the best known people that I've worked with, if you ask my crew of 25, 30 people who their favorite person is, I think they'd all probably actually say Cindy Crawford, because she will come into a room and she will look around and sit next to the person that perhaps feels most disenfranchised by her presence, or most uncomfortable, or feels that, if she's not going to speak to me, she's XYZ. So she goes out of her way to be as normal as possible, and that's very nice. We've had some experiences of people that are tougher. I think if you had to, this is a massive generalization, but I'm going to go for it. You take people in sport, you take people in Hollywood, you take people in the top tier of modeling, and you take people in the top musicians, and you put them in a balloon. Who are you going to throw out of the balloon first? The musician, the Hollywood star, the sports star, or the actor, or the supermodel? And my answer is that there is no hard and fast rule. We've met some lovely people in acting who are so down to earth, UK actors or American actors, very nice experiences with them. I think with sport, some of them are less comfortable in front of a camera because it's not something they've really ever done other than when they're doing what they do very well. Mm-hmm. So occasionally it's an uncomfortable experience for them. And age, the reality is we all age every year, and some people, as they get older, are less comfortable being photographed, and I get that.
I get that too.
Yeah.
But your balloon analogy here, if you had included politicians in the mix, I know
That
who
would
they would have thrown up
that would
first.
be much easier. That would be much easier.
Choose him.
Yeah, that would be a much easier one. But we've actually had some very nice experiences with politicians as well. I had a lunch with George W. A couple of years back at SMU, and the lunch was meant to go on for maybe an hour and a half. He's a painter. He paints a lot now.
I paint too,
Yeah,
and he
there you go.
encouraged me to start.
So, but that was a lot of fun. He doesn't struggle with the charm, as you know.
Yeah.
We'll continue with our interview in a moment, but first I'd like to thank my sponsors. Lucy Pet Foods is the leader in gut health. Their formulas for life feature prebiotic, balanced fiber that nourishes your dog and cat's total health. Every purchase helps support the Lucy Pet Foundation, a 501c3 charity helping animals. Save 15% off your first order and use the promo code SAGELYSPEAKING, all one word, and you will get free shipping at lucypetfoods.com. If you're committed to tackling the opioid and addiction crises, then you need to be at the 2025 RX Summit. Use code SAGELY, that's SAGELY, for an extra $100 off. Join top experts and professionals as we share strategies for prevention, deflection, treatment, and recovery. Don't miss this chance to be part of the change. Head over to rx-summit.com to register now. That's rx-summit.com for an additional $100 off.
Hi, honey. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that I'll be going out with the guys after work tonight to catch the game. It's been a long day and I'm pretty wiped out, so Harry's going to give me a pill to help me stay awake. I won't know it, but the pill will be laced with fentanyl, which means you won't see me again because I'll be dead almost instantly. I love you.
And now, back to our interview.
So you touched a little bit, you're a world traveler, but last night you touched on some politics, not a political party or ideology, but you talked about the difference between what's happening in your home turf, Scotland, and the UK and the US. And what do you see and what do you hear when you travel around the world about current US politics and then the comparison between back home and here?
I think, well, the starting point, the first thing I'd say is if we go back to when I took that picture of Diego Maradona in 1986, to the best of my knowledge, the 6 biggest companies in the world were not invented then, and those 6 biggest companies are all American, and they've come out of colleges, whether it be in Boston or in California, and become the 6 biggest companies in the world. You have a schooling system, a university system, and I'd say also a kind of risk managed venture capital, private equity system that is going to continue to reward your country. And that means that all other things being equal, your economy is going to be in better health than countries that don't have that. If I look at the UK and I look at our 100 leading companies in the UK and by market cap, Apple's bigger than all of them put together. There is not one company on that list that I would see why I should buy right now. If you take the UK, which is struggling, and it's struggling because we don't have any world-leading companies. We're world leaders in a couple of small areas like creative arts. I think we're very strong, always have been very strong in creative arts. People laugh, but our Premier League football is a world-leading industry, which is why so many American billionaires have bought into it. But by and large, we're an economy that's flatlining at best. We have, like a lot of Europe, we have a major immigration issue. When I first moved to London, London was 66% white. Now it's halved from that level. Now, I'm the least racist person. I'm not a racist person, but what has certainly happened in London is you've seen an increase in crime. London's a dangerous city. And in Scotland, where I'm from, so many people work for the government. The government is the biggest employer in Scotland by a long way, and that's not good news when our finances are in a mess anyway. But the thing that I see more than anything else is the breadth and depth of your wealth in your country is something that it's impossible really for people anywhere else to conceive. If you take the UK and you say, look at London, which of course is a world-leading city, and then you say, what's the second lead city for luxury spend? If you're Prada or Gucci, where are you going to open up if you're going to expand outside London? It might be Edinburgh in Scotland. It's a beautiful city. It might be Manchester. Could be Leeds. But whatever one of those three it is, we reckon there are 65 places in America that are better for us than that second place in the UK. 65. And that's quite a telling statistic. So we spend 85% of our time here, and we are the states that we traditionally have done very well in are, I think, more likely to be Republican states. If you take the middle of America, we do well. There might be lower populations, but so in higher population areas like Texas is our lead state in America. We sell far more art in Dallas than we do in London. We sell far more art in Fort Worth than we would do in Paris or Rome. And I think it's incumbent within your culture and your society because you've all been entrepreneurs. You all came from nowhere. You came from somewhere, but you started here with nowhere. Is a spirit of partnership and collaboration and wanting to help. I see more of that in America than I do anywhere else. You come into a room and say, "This is David," and then the next sentence would be something like, he runs a very successful business, you two of you should talk to each other. Whereas in the UK they go, this is David, he likes a jolly good red wine. Well, that's not very helpful. Or he's shit at golf or whatever. It'll be self-deprecating, it'll be teasing humor rather than an effort to introduce. And you do that so well, so naturally. Some states maybe more than others, but we've found it quite easy to become, to network in your country.
How's Soho going in the New York business? I know you have your Wolf on Wall Street series.
Yeah.
But I mean, the West appeals to everybody, and the spirit of the West. And you talked specifically about Monument Valley. You've shot there a lot. And
I mean, I think a couple of things. Firstly, I was very much of the view that if Shannon was going to open in Manhattan, she should not be opening in Upper East Side. She should open downtown in Soho. Much better there than Chelsea or Upper East Side. And the reason I thought that would be right is that is Broadway. West Broadway gets international traffic. It's like a airport terminal. I think if you had a gallery in Upper East Side, and I still think the most enduring symbol of Americana is a cowboy, but you have to suspect that any personal anthology on the Wild West is probably not going to do so well on 61st and Madison versus Highland Park in Dallas, or Fort Worth, or Wyoming, or Bozeman, Montana, or whatever. So I think we do target market, and that's why we brought the Wolf up to Wall Street.
Oh, I just love it. I grew up touring all of these places and camping in Moab and all of that, and I love what you have captured and what you've done, and that you've put so much life into it. There are stories in every single one of your pieces that I look at. And it's just such a pleasure to know you. I think this is my second event with you. I think when I first met you, it took me about 5 words until I used a swear word when I talked to you.
Sorry.
No, I used it. And I think
you feel comfortable. You can feel comfortable swearing, cussing in front of me. That's fine.
Well, I think I was talking about standing. You do a lot of women.
You better rephrase that.
Well, in various levels of dress. And I think when I met you, I was standing underneath a woman's naked butt. And I think I pointed that out to you.
It's an interesting, we prefer women with clothes on to clothes off. It's very rare that I would photograph someone in the nude. And I think also female form photography has also come under quite a lot of pressure. It's funny, the whole political correctness or some sort of this sort of self-righteous virtue finger pointing stuff. There are a lot of areas of photography that are in trouble. So if you go and photograph remote tribes around the world and you take them out of their Real Madrid tops and put them in traditional clothing, is that exploitation? Is it patronizing? And the people that focused on that are very able and brave, going into places which are dangerous, like Papua New Guinea. That whole area of photography has become a bit of a death zone through no fault of the practitioners, because people are saying, if the Washington Redskins become the Washington Commanders, should that happen at the same time that you are going to the Amazon and photographing tribes that haven't seen people like you before? So that area is under pressure. Then female form photography is under pressure, because is that gratuitous? Is it misogynist? Is it Dickensian? But luckily we don't. Photographers that I know are great mates, and their whole marketplace has been crushed over the last, ever since really Victoria's Secret started to come under a bit of pressure, and I knew quite a few of them there because they worked on campaigns for that. Then, as I said, wildlife stuff has come under pressure as well. So you're working in ever decreasing circles of what you can get away with photographing, and so the Wild West has been a good one, and I think I sense in America that the Westerns for a while were really out of vogue, and the love affair, the love letter that Americans had, which started with John Ford and then went through with Clint Eastwood, and I think Taylor Sheridan has brought a lot of it back and into people's homes, and I'm delighted about that, and what an amazing storyteller he is.
Absolutely. Actually, both one of our cameramen and I were extras on the Horizon shoot.
Oh, you were? Fantastic.
Oh, it was a wonderful experience,
Yeah,
just to be on that set and to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
feel as if I'm looking off camera at the and he just rocked it. I, on the other hand, was a pretty pathetic extra.
I'm sure you weren't. I'm surprised you're not at the Oscars on Sunday
There
night.
you go. No, but it was phenomenal. But I think you're right, and I think that's always there. And as if an artist or somebody like a Kevin Costner or a David Yarrow continues to focus on it and keep it alive, it goes through its fads, ups and downs.
Well, it's fascinating. My daughter read history at Oxford, and very proud of her. And she studied American 19th century history, and I still think it is the greatest story ever told. But and the great thing is, if it was a story that was played out in the most miserable flat countryside of somewhere like, say, Belgium, it will still be a hell of a story. But it's played out in this magnificent grandeur of the West. So the push west, you have this collision between a sort of smorgasbord of characters, whether they be outlaws, saloon girls, hookers, snake oil salesmen, cowboy capitalists, and you throw them all together into this mix. It's like a storybook, and then you put Monument Valley in the middle of it. Well, it's not a bad recipe. And it's reality.
Absolutely. Well, you've been so generous with your time. Before I leave, I'm happy to have you all day if you want to keep talking, but I know you've got another reception.
No, I'm fine.
You've got another party tonight, entertaining people and telling your fabulous stories. But what is next for you after this?
We're, photography is one of these things where if you take restaurants as a business model, there's success of the best restaurants. Like if you tell me the restaurant you've eaten at most in your life, one of the things that you'll say is, I just love the menu, I love the way how they do that spaghetti vongole or whatever, it's the best. The only industry I know that gets away with offering more of the same is the restaurant business. I think if you're a photographer, you cannot do more of the same. You've got to move on. And it's the journey itself that's important. You just cannot continue to offer galleries in a year's time more of what they've already seen, because that's not going to help them. And as I said last night, running an art gallery by and large is a shit idea as a business. Most of them fail. And the good ones, and Shannon works very hard, got good staff. The good ones, you have to repay their faith in you by mixing it up the whole time. And sometimes we fail. We've had we had this idea which was totally wrong, that I thought, well, if the cowboy is such the American love affair with the cowboy, what other kind of storybook characters can we do a theme on? And in a moment of complete mental aberration and just idiocy, I thought the next character that we should focus on was pirates, because Pirates of the Caribbean had been such an outstanding franchise, and then the rides in Disneyland and whatever, and everyone watched that series, and the numbers were just ridiculous. So during COVID, I took a bunch of people to this island in the Caribbean, which was not easy to get to because it was COVID, even though they didn't really seem to care. There was it's a lawless place. And we invested best part of $500,000 on trying to tell pirate stories. And it didn't work. And when something doesn't work, of course you learn so much more than when something does. So I know it's an overused cliche, but failure is an integral part of success. You've got to fail. And why did people not want pirates? Because unlike a cowboy who's a real figure, an integral part of American culture, a pirate is something out of fantasy that we don't. Yeah, we knew there were people that wandered around, walked the plank and had a hook in one arm or whatever, but we don't know any of them. We just know Johnny Depp from Pirates of the Caribbean. And also, unless you have a home that with a kind of nautical feel to it, like if you've got a home in Key West or something like that, I can see you wanting to put a pirate in the bar. But not if you're living in Dallas or Chicago, or what's the connection between you and, you might call one of your mates a pirate because of whatever reason is. So you learn from those things. We started to work on a couple of themes and we start gently, because you want to have that, you want to iterate, you want to go back and learn and make things better from the iteration. And secondly, you want to test the market. So James Bond is a British figure, and as I was saying last night, it's a franchise that's known the world over, and it's quite easy to tell stories that are Bond-esque without having Sean Connery in the picture. I had the fortune of having, before Sean passed, it's a highlight of my life actually. I had breakfast with him, and we'd both been drinking quite heavily the night before, and he looked fantastic. I looked a dreadful mess. And we were at the Crillon in Paris, and the waiter came over and said, Monsieur Connery, qu'est-ce que c'est voulez pour le petit déjeuner? And he said in front of me, I think I'll have the scrambled eggs. And I thought Sean Connery said scrambled eggs in front of me. It was a great moment. I digress. But so we're trying a bit of Bond. I think we've got this idea. Your resorts, winter resorts, we've covered a lot. I'm getting to know Palm Beach for all its God's waiting room or whatever people call it. It's a funny old place, and so we're doing community shoot where we get a lot of extras in from the community, and we're turning one of the polo fields in Wellington back to 1970. So every car that comes in will be 1970. Everyone will be dressed in 1970 clothing. And then we'll just do a polo match that's geared towards me. Rather than when people take pictures of polo matches, of course, the last thing they care about is the cameraman. So we'll contrive it so that I can try and take a picture with a real sense of place. So that's quite a big project coming up. We're doing the Ryder Cup, as you know, being a golfer, is in Bethpage, New York this year, and I think one of our most exciting projects is that we're working with the European team, and I'm taking them into doing the gangs in New York 10 days before the Ryder Cup, which will be quite fun, dressing those characters up. Wow. I've been trying to photograph Willie Nelson for quite a while, and speaking to, you'll know a lot of people, he's on tour, some of those people around him, and we got to the people that know him best. And Willie, bless him, just doesn't want to have his picture taken.
Oh, that's funny.
You know, he's just, I think he's at an age where he just doesn't want that to happen. And I was disappointed. And my son said to me, he's rational in these things. He said, Dad, what's the point of taking a picture of someone that doesn't want to have his picture taken? And that's probably absolutely right. You can understand. I think he wants his image to be at a certain point in his life and remembered that way. That's got to be tough. Boy, a lot of these sensitivities I've never thought a photographer would have to deal with. Wokeism, you know, and having to tailor messages to the culture of the day. Yeah. It's that whole culture with wokeism and areas of patronization, appropriation. The one thing that the people that are thumping away in their Starbucks in Seattle, not that I'm trying to specify a place where this might happen. Metaphorically speaking. What they should do is they should turn around and say, what does the individual who's having the picture think? We, in Custer's last stand up in Montana, we worked with the Crows and the Lakota Indians, and I had the great privilege of photographing the chief. And he's a man of enormous dignity. And we photographed him where Spielberg shot Close Encounters of the Third Kind in Wyoming. And of course, they do the ceremonial battles up there every year to commemorate that battle. And we were very lucky with the weather. There was mist around Devil's Tower. And we're all staying in a kind of shitty hotel in the village. And we went back, and I got the picture to show to him. And he was with his whole family. And he cried for 2 minutes, just sobbed and cried, because he was so proud. And then, of course, you get the 20-year-old in Starbucks saying, how dare you photograph a Native American for exploitation, commercial gain? Well, number one, it was one of the days he'll always remember. The family have got the picture there everywhere. And we gave back to the community, as we always do. But it's funny, when you get those comments, I still struggle sometimes to ignore the trolls, and I take it personally. You don't take it personally. I do. Yeah, it's hard not to. It is hard not to. I was with a model, and her husband is a sports star. They tend to go hand in hand, the model and the sports star. But you know exactly who the sports star is. And she told me the story where he made a mistake in a game, that may or may not have cost. Yeah. And then they're driving back home in the winter. And on her feed, she gets, I hope you both get killed in a car crash on the way home. Now, I think at some stage something has to happen. People just shouldn't be able to do that, but I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but I think that's just shocking. And of course, particularly the people that immediately block, they change their account, so they just make it up just to send that one message, and then it's gone.
Yeah, we've made it easier to spew hatred, anonymous hatred. It is not good for humankind, for sure. And I don't see an end to it, but.
You know, my show title is called "It's a Beautiful World," and I'm always a glass half full person. I think for as long as we both lived, there's been trouble around the world. You didn't have to look far to find it. There's a problem going on somewhere. In the 70s, there was all sorts of things going on. In the 80s, there was all sorts of things. And of course, you get into the days you remember forever. Where were you when Lockerbie happened? Where were you when 9/11 happened? And right now, I know there are people who are worried and there's concerns, but I think about my kids, and I don't think they've ever lived in a better world than they're living in now. So I'm full of positivity. Look at the enormous advance in medical science over the last 15, 20 years. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, but you can find trouble wherever if you want to.
But maybe this is a great opportunity to close on a positive note.
Absolutely.
And I hope you'll be back here in Durango.
Certainly will.
I hope sooner rather than every year.
I should be asking you questions. You've got a far more interesting life than me.
Oh yeah, right. Hardly on that. But I do want to tell you one thing. I don't know if you knew that there is a woman out here who owns she has 100 head of bison just over here in Hesperus. She runs this all by herself. And she was a former podcast guest, but I wanted to tell you, you can come here to Durango and have your bison at the same time, even here in Durango.
We'd love to shoot bison here. It's been funny because some of the coldest days I've spent in the field in the last 3 years have been 2 days here, and I know you've had a miserable winter in terms of snowfall and precipitation. And when we were up filming up the hill yesterday, some of the team were saying it's probably 20 degrees different than it was the last time we were up there. But we like to photograph bison in the snow. It's kind of what identifies them to us. You showed a blue bison pretty much last night. You were shooting in Yellowstone, and that's cold. Yeah, Yellowstone, it still has the days. Not as many as there used to be. Yeah. I'm not a skeptic of global warming because I see it happening all the time around the world. But we also know it's not a straight line thing, and you still get some exceptionally cold periods that set records. But I'm not a skeptic of it. I do get it. Well, you did come at a gorgeous day. Beautiful day. But it shouldn't be gorgeous today. It should be cold and snowy, but it's 60 degrees outside. So. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. You are, and on that note, you are truly a fascinating, charismatic, sleep-deprived person. Self-induced. And the party's beginning. So on that note, as we talk over the music, I want to thank my guest today, David Yarrow. And there we go, right on cue, they stop again. My guest today, David Yarrow. Look him up. Pick up his pieces now. You'll be thankful for it, if you can. They're pricey. And special thank you to Sorrel Sky and our friend Shannon Campbell for allowing us to use this space. To the listeners and viewers, thank you very much for joining me on Sagely Speaking. To my sponsors, thank you very much, for without you I couldn't do what I do. And until next time, be well.